Good news, everyone. We finally made it to Exodus. Yes, we finally made it to Exodus. Aren't you excited? I am. So I present to you a conversation with fire inspired by the book of Exodus.
A conversation with fire. In our last story, we learned about how the Israelites expanded in numbers, and Pharaoh feared that they would overtake him. His darkened heart led him to enslave them. When slavery didn't work, he ordered all the newborn boys to be thrown into the Nile River. The river ran red with the blood of children, yet one was able to survive, Moses. He was saved by his mother and found by the princess of Egypt. In this story, we will learn how Moses grew up a part of both worlds and became concerned about his people being treated poorly by the Egyptians. Despite his flaws, God calls Moses to lead his people, as inspired by the book of Exodus. Moses could hear screaming in the distance. He ran towards the cries to find a Hebrew slave being brutalized by an Egyptian taskmaster. Whips, fists, and fury were being unleashed on the back of the Israelite. Blood, sweat, and tears fell from the man's face. His eyes caught Moses's as he was being tortured in front of him. Moses watched in horror. The Egyptian in him was used to this image, yet the Hebrew in him teemed with anger. Moses looked away and saw that nobody else was present. In a moment of unbridled rage, Moses attacked the Egyptian. Tumbling in the sand, the two fought, exchanging blows and screams. Moses prevailed against the taskmaster and took his life. The slave had fled, so Moses buried the body in the sand. The next morning, sore from his encounter the day before, Moses was walking amongst the Hebrews once again. When he saw that there were two Hebrew men fighting, he stopped them. "Why would you fight your friend?" he asked to the man who had started the fight. The man pointed at Moses. Angry, he said, "Who appointed you judge over me, Prince of Egypt? Are you going to kill me, as you did the Egyptian yesterday?" Fear overcame Moses, for if the slave had known, it was only a matter of time before Pharaoh found out as well. Sure enough, Pharaoh did find out, and put a warrant out for Moses' arrest so he might kill him. Moses fled the mighty nation of Egypt, the place he had called home for his entire life. He stripped himself of all signs of royalty and ran with the sun behind him. He ran to the countryside, to the people of Midian. There he settled, met his wife Zipporah, and lived a life of simplicity. 40 years had passed, and the Pharaoh had passed, and a new one was in power. Moses became a shepherd and tended to his father-in-law's sheep in tranquility. Moses felt at home and at peace. Yet hundreds of miles away, his people wailed in pain under the whip of their oppressors. Moses could not hear them, but God could. One day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro. He led the sheep far into the wilderness and came to a mountain called Sinai, the mountain of God. The mountain covered the sun, and the sheep grazed in the shade. Moses saw a faint light flickering in the distance. He approached it and found a blazing fire engulfing a bush. The fire raged, yet the bush did not burn, nor wither. The fire reflected off Moses' eyes. He stared in amazement. "Why isn't it burning?" he whispered to himself. He took a step closer to the flame. Then a sound like 1,000 rushing waters emanated from the flame. A voice so beautiful yet so powerful filled the air around him. "Moses," the voice said. "Moses," it said again. "Here I am," Moses replied, still in awe. "Do not come any closer," the voice said. "Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground." Moses did as he commanded, now standing in amazement before the flame. "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." When Moses heard this, he covered his face and fell to the floor. He now fully understood he was in the presence of the Most High God, Elohim, the creator of the heavens and earth. The Lord spoke again, saying, I have seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. Their cries have reached my ears, and their suffering is before my eyes. Moses listened intently. The Lord continued, I have come to rescue my people from the power of the Egyptians. I will lead them out to a new land, a land flowing with milk and honey. I shall wipe away their tears and deliver them from those that abuse them. Now I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must be the one to lead Israel out of Egypt. Moses' amazement turned into protest. Who am I to go before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people out of Egypt? For Moses knew that he was once a part of the people that oppressed him. A sense of unworthiness welled up in Moses. God answered him and said, I will be with you. Moses continued to protest. If I go to them, who shall I say sent me? The flames grew larger and more glorious before Moses. His voice illuminated from the flames as boldly as the light itself. I am that I am, he said with power. When the people ask who has sent you, say it is I am, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. That is my name forever, and I will be remembered throughout all generations. The Lord then instructed Moses to go and take his message to Pharaoh, so that his people might be set free. Yet God knew that Pharaoh would not listen. He said, I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless he is compelled. So my mighty hand will be stretched out to strike Egypt with wonder, and I will give my people favor. After hearing these things, Moses grew less and less confident in himself. So God instructed him, Take your staff in your hand and throw it on the ground. Moses obeyed, and the staff began to move, crawl, and then slither as a snake. Moses ran from it, terrified. God instructed him to pick it up by the tail. He did, and it was immediately turned back into a staff. God then instructed him to put his hand in his cloak. Once he did, his hand became leprous. Rotting flesh plagued Moses' hand, and it was clearly on the brink of total decay. He put it back in his cloak, and his hand was restored. These would be signs God would allow Moses to use as proof he was sent by God. Yet Moses was still riddled with doubt, for he stuttered in his speech and struggled with a deep anger inside him. Moses felt unworthy. Moses begged God, "O Lord, I am not eloquent. I have always been slow of speech and tongue. You must have the wrong person." Immediately the flames raged, and the voice of God burned greater than the fire. "Who made man's mouth?" he shouted. "Who makes him mute, deaf, seeing, or blind? Is it not I? Now go." Moses trembled before the burning bush, and the voice of God continued, now more comforting and silent. "Moses, I will be your mouth and teach you what to say." Moses had tears streaming down his face. He was afraid. "Please, send someone else," he wept silently. God grew angry with Moses, for he could not see what was clearly in front of him. The sovereignty of God would be what accomplished great things. "I will send your brother Aaron, the Levite. He can speak well, and he will come out to meet you." The flame dissipated into the ether. Night had fallen, and Moses stood there in shock. Yet in that instant, an empowering spirit overwhelmed him. He took his staff and ventured forth to Egypt.